Hey, what's going on? My name is Scott, and I teach police officers about personal wellness because that is ever so crucial nowadays. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to a police officer who essentially died. I kid you not. And when you hear his story, you're going to be like, whoa. And here's the deal. He was taken by one of the top fatal threats to law enforcement. And two things we can't have happen to us: denial and then lack of awareness. So when you're watching this, you need to be mindful of what you're doing to prevent it, and then also stay aware about it. But then I pose this question: is your police department equipped to handle response to it in the community, but also if something were to happen? And if you're thinking, no, we're not, then Brandon Griffith has a solution. So Brandon Griffith with Griffith Blue Heart, please say what happened to you 8 years ago.
Yeah, it's not always the easiest thing to talk about, but when I was 26 years old and I suffered cardiac arrest, and it's kind of, a lot of people don't know what cardiac arrest is. As soon as you hear the word cardiac, the first thing they jump to is, oh, you had a heart attack. That's not the case. I mean, here I was on top of the world. I mean, I was an FTO. I was a defensive tactics instructor. I just made my SWAT team. I'm married to my beautiful wife, who was my high school sweetheart, settling into our house nice. She just got accepted into medical school. And literally in a heartbeat, my whole life changed. My wife makes fun of me a lot because, I've been shot at, I've been in knife fights, and I died at home reading a book. You just can't make it up, right?
Oh, wow. Dang.
I was reading this book and I put it down and said, hey, I'm going to take the dog out to the restroom. And I took 2 steps towards my door, and it hit me like a freight train. And that's weird because most of the time when you talk to cardiac arrest survivors, they don't remember their incident. They wake up in the hospital and someone tells them what happened. I think because of the work that we've done in law enforcement and being predisposed to critical stress incidents, and we're used to our bodies having chemical dumps like adrenaline and cortisol and dopamine.
Yeah, good
I was
point.
just primed for it, So even though I collapsed within about a second and a half, everything slowed down. I mean, I had time distortion like you wouldn't believe. So I remember this feeling in my chest, like, when your heart skips a beat when someone jumps out to scare you.
Yes.
And that fluttering happened nonstop. So, I mean, I knew something was wrong. I was trying to force myself to combat breathe, but when your heart's in ventricular fibrillation, your lungs physically cannot expand with air because there's no blood being pumped to them. So I started doing agonal breathing where I'm going wisping, and my wife turned around, sees I'm in lockjaw. My face is the darkest purple she'd ever seen. So she immediately calls 911, drops the phone on speaker as I collapse into my bookshelf. She tries to catch me, but I'm 6'4". She's 5'3". So I topple right over her, put my head through the wall.
Wow.
And I'm looking out in my hallway on my hands and my knees, and I'm starting to get tunnel vision, but it's not like normal tunnel vision you experience in the field where it's kind of hard to focus on certain things. This is this dark purple, like purplish, almost black. And I'm starting to see silhouettes and shapes, and everything's fluttering out on me. Well, I now know that was, gravity taking the blood from my brain and my ocular cavities. So I was literally watching myself die. And in that moment, here I have all this training here. I'm a police officer. I used to be an EMT. I'm an instructor. I got all this stuff, and there's nothing I can do to save my own life in this exact moment. That feeling of helplessness is something I don't wish on anybody, man. I collapsed right there. I dropped dead. My wife rolled me on my back. She started doing CPR on me. She did a phenomenal job. She worked on me by herself for 4.5 minutes before the first officer arrived. And she had to stop working on me, hold the dog, unlock the door for the officer. He comes in, sees a fellow officer on the ground, and just jumps on my chest and does a phenomenal dive. He worked on me until fire and EMS got there around the 9.5 minute mark. They dragged my body out in my living room. I should note the officer didn't have an AED, so he wasn't able to shock me out.
Okay.
But the fire department did. They IO drilled me, pumped me full of epinephrine. They did a whole bunch of advanced life support stuff, and eventually they were able to resuscitate me. But all in all, I was medically dead for about 16.5 minutes.
Wow. I'm glad to be talking to you right now, Brandon.
I feel blessed, man. I've been given a second chance. And when you start looking at the realities and the numbers of cardiac arrest, it's terrifying, man. 1,000 Americans today are going to die from cardiac arrest, and it's heart disease is the number 1 killer in the country.
Yeah.
Here I was given a second chance. It's something I don't take lightly.
It obviously took effect on you physically. How did it take effect on you mentally once you were brought back to life?
Kind of a roller coaster, I remember every part of my death, but waking up, my wife and the crew said I woke up and started pushing guys off me, and my wife told me not to leave her, and I said I won't before I collapsed again. But I don't remember that portion of it. The only thing I remember after being resuscitated at my house was I could feel the sway of the gurney and hear their footsteps in my front rocks. So according to the guys, I was in the back of the ambulance cracking jokes, calling them hose draggers. And it's actually the next 5 days that were the mental reset button. My brain hadn't been oxygenated properly for 16.5 minutes. And I say after 4 minutes, you suffer brain damage. And I was already brain damaged before that and had concussions and stuff. So it
Oh,
wasn't
yeah,
too
yeah.
different from what I'm used to. So, but at first, you get this feeling of gratitude, not only you wake up in the hospital and your brain's reset and I'm going in on a consciousness and I'm surrounded by my family, my friends, my wife, and she's telling me what happened, and you're happy to be alive. But quickly that goes into, why did this happen? It's frustrating. You go through this complete wave of anger and acceptance, and then you also get this feeling of righteousness. You've been given a second chance. It's this blessing that I've been
Right.
given, and I want to earn it. So it lit a fire into my path. And it was when I got back to the field, I realized how unprepared law enforcement as a whole is for resuscitation emergencies. And it started kind of as a small thing doing consulting work, but it eventually blew up into a whole nonprofit.
What are you doing now with your nonprofit?
So it's an entire system that we're putting in. So our nonprofit, Griffith Blue Heart Nonprofit, originally I just started trying to work with, my agency and some fellow agencies to talk about the need for AEDs and how to implement them. And then when I started getting meetings with command staff members, and they're like, hey, this is a great idea. Where do we go from here? So I had to create stuff from scratch because there's almost no system of care for law enforcement. I mean, there's some great agencies that'll donate AEDs, but they toss them at them and then the program fails within 2 to 4 months, or 2 to 4 years because no one's monitoring it. There was no policies, dispatch protocols, chain of command, sustainability plans. It crumbles. So we had to create everything from scratch. So we brought in, policy writers, we brought in chiefs of police, we brought in trainers. We created our programs from scratch to help implement high performance resuscitation programs with law enforcement. So now we actually raise funds and donate AEDs to law enforcement agencies. We help them with their grant writing, their policy writing. We created the Advanced Law Enforcement Resuscitation Academy, and we kind of help them through that. But we also do a lot of advocacy and awareness. Police officers and other first responders are at a much higher risk for cardiovascular disease. That's our number one killer. It's not suicide. It's not gunfire. If you actually look at officers who are dying, it's from cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, you're right. Wow. This is absolutely incredible what you just covered, all within a short amount of time. Just as much as they emphasize proactive policing, you need to be proactive with your health too. And the department needs to be proactive about it. So where can they find you and get the services?
Go to griffithblueheart.com. That's our website for our nonprofit. We have a list of services. We do a lot more than that. I'm just a street cop, so I got to get better on my website. And I'm horrible at social media. I'm on LinkedIn under Brandon Griffith, but I'm revamping that. And I'm very excited to let everybody know that we're about to start a giving campaign to raise funds for law enforcement here in the next week. So I'll give you those details as well.
All units respond. Backup is en route. Proceed with caution.